Good afternoon, everyone. I go by the name Shotade Olusegun. In this particular live session, I want to discuss with you the complex system of the universe. Well, in this particular live session, I'm going to actually apply formula of everything. So we're going to have like three result phases for us to know what the solution is, right? As we go deep into the core singularity of the black hole. Well, formula of everything is a derived formula of relativity. So it's a kind of formula that unifies quantum mechanics to classical mechanics. It's a powerful formula because it's a formula that can actually fit back on itself. So what I mean by that is that when you supply an input, that input will generate an output. Then you can insert the generated output as input to generate further output. So we're going to do that right here in this particular video. So I will use the diagram, the image that I have, hanging around my head here to illustrate further so we can visually get to know, the happenings in the universe in that regard. So now, it is very important for us to know that complex system is wired into the overall system of the universe. So we often see that effect of complex system all around. So now, by applying formula of everything, I get to see this complex system in form of transition from a substrate dimension to higher dimension, where you need to know that dimension is a degree of freedom and power. Dimension is a degree of freedom and power. So now there is this interconnectivity of dimensions. So more or less like they are being interlocked into one another. And that, tends to be the intrinsic structure of the universe. So now, by this transition, we get to know that the substrate dimension is incomplete unless it is connected to the higher dimension such that it gets connected to a positron. Though initially what is connected to might not be positron, but there is this sense of flipping mechanism that will instantly be activated, and once we have that particle being retracted into the substrate system of that substrate dimension, we know that it is a positron. So now we can see that by having that, for instance, if we have 2D to be the substrate dimension, the higher dimension will be 3D. So we're going to have that hierarchical connection, or probably let me say we're going to have that hierarchical tapestry of this dimension as we go higher. So definitely for us to have the full picture of 2D, to have the full reality of 2D, then we must actually transit or connect to the higher dimension, which is 3D. Then for us to get the full reality of 3D, we must actually connect it to 4D. So I did one live session yesterday where I discussed the structure of dimensions, how the virtual law of relativity is embedded right inside the trajectory of dimension, such that we have inversely related relationship to define that gap interval that we have, and the necessity of the flipping mechanism for us to have a flipped version of the original one. And I cited the example of you being in front of mirror. You're going to have your real self, and then there is going to be then you're going to have the virtual clone of yourself, right? Probably in the mirror or at the back of the mirror. So the virtual clone of yourself is really going to be flipped. So when you dissect that object, you know that the object is actually flipped. So there is this flipping mechanism that pervades the whole universe, and that flipping mechanism is what the novel field of study that I invented is all about, which is shotadiology. So shotadiology is a kind of study field where we can get to know what consciousness is. So formula of everything is not just being called formula of everything for nothing. It's a formula that unravel the mystery of what consciousness is, what free will is, and some other things like that. So I have video series on shotadiology. You can just get a copy or get the whole series for you to have understanding of what shotadiology is all about. So shotadiology is coined from my surname, and the story is actually longer than I alone. Like, it is not limited, it is not restricted to me, but I developed that field of study, which is shotadiology. So now, by applying formula of everything, I have this vertical trajectory of time, and that signifies that time trajectory, which is the default identity of time, is instant. And if we were to say that truly and genuinely that the trajectory of time is instant, we know that it has to be descriptive or snappy. But what we have as solution is far from being snappy, because there is this elongation that is being caused by energy. And in that live session of yesterday, I discussed the two identities of time and two identities of energy. And by the time we have this relativistic scaling, or this relativistic relationship between the two, such that we have inverse relationship, we know that there is possibility for us to have emergent of mass convergence, you understand, and there is possibility for us to have that feature of that static feature, you understand, possibility to have constant feature, and there is possibility for us to have all the symmetries as we have them in the universe, you understand. So now what I want to say is that time by default is instant, and then when time is in relativistic scaling to energy, time is continuous. Energy, on the other hand, is infinite. So energy has this default feature of being everywhere all the time, and that is why in the vacuum we could even see the presence of energy. So energy by default is infinite, and then when energy is in relativistic scaling to time, energy is discrete. So we need to get that at the back of our minds. And now The relativity is to have inverse relationship, and we see that by saying when time scales higher, energy becomes low. You understand? It simply means that when time scales wide, energy is low. Yes, because when energy is being scaled with time in such vast, space or distance, then the intensity of energy will be low. So now, in the contracting phase, which is in the black hole, we can see that the intensity of energy is high as time is scaling narrow. So that is the inverse relationship between time and energy. And as well, we have that inverse relationship between mass and time, and even between mass and energy. So in the realm, in that jurisdiction of energy, there is no convergence. In the expanding phase of the universe, there is no convergence of mass. We have it outside the time energy wave model, and that could tell us the reason light is massless. You understand? So we have decaying phenomenon at quantum level. You understand? Even though energy is actually scaling wide with time, energy still has that feature of contraction. And so that is that. It is very important for us to know this, because by getting to know this, we get to know what the complex system is all about. Now we have the complex system when we transit into the higher dimension, and the essence of going into the higher dimension is that the way quantum mechanics work is quite different from the way classical mechanics works. You understand? So now there is this speed difference factor, and that speed difference factor is what relativity accounts for. And that is why when relativity is considered, we see that quantum phenomenon or quantum particle will be will be fuzzy rather. You understand? So that is when relativity is considered. But if there is no this relativity in place, quantum particle would ordinarily relate with its environment just as we normally relate at the classical level. So relativity is the key feature for us to have the essence of speed difference factor. So now the momentum at classical level is not so, it is not high, just as it is not high. So when we compare that, we know that the speed at quantum level is so high, while the speed at classical level is so low. You understand? So we have that. So now the complex system is by transiting into the higher dimension. And then why must that be so? It is simply because when you look at the situation of things that we have at classical level, you can see that excess, or rather let me say excessive energy, would actually be accommodated at classical level by expanding the fabric of the universe. And so we have this flexible fabric at the classical level that can actually accommodate excessive energy or excess energy like that. But at quantum level, it is quite different because energy is discrete. So when we now have intrusion of excess energy, there will be this discontinuous emergence. And so it's more or less like we have a breakable fabric at quantum level. And as a result of that, the pressure, the temperature at quantum level will be so intense, and as a result of that, it might be difficult for us to have the emergence of, or to have the convergence of electrons mass worth. Because by applying formula of everything, I realized that right inside the nucleus, electrons mass worth is not defined. But when we now get to the, when that trajectory gets to the higher dimension, because there we have higher degree of freedom and power, so we could have the convergence of electron relative, because we are talking about relativity right here, relative to the undefined electron in the substrate dimension. So when electron is undefined, definitely it's going to be, it will serve as positive charge, and it's a positron in that sense. So the moment we now have that transition into the higher dimension, then at the instant connection with that electrons of the higher dimension, we have that instant flipping mechanism that converts that electron's mass worth to that of the positron. And definitely at that point we know that electron will be defined, because that is the virtue of entanglement, and we know the entanglement is far beyond the constraint of time energy wave model, and that is why its transmission is instant. You understand? So basically we're going to have that flipping mechanism, and so the positron will be retracted back into the substrate system, so that energy can be energized at that present phase of time peregrination, or we call it at the event horizon. So now there is this slight break in momentum at event horizon for us to have an inverted momentum, because it's more or less like we have a field that is propagating outwards in the cosmological space, while we now have the field in black hole that is propagating inwards. So now the point of transition must instantly break the momentum for us to have transformation into that contracting phase of the universe, which is the black hole. So that is why we have that flipping mechanism at the present phase of time peregrination, or at event horizon. And so the positron would energize, and so we can have momentum into the black hole. Now when you look at what we have, if you look at the trajectory of energy right in the past phase, which is the cosmological space where you have expansion of the universe, you see that the trajectory of energy is negative, and that shows that electron is at work in the past phase. But in the present phase, we have the intensity of energy to be increasing, which is positive, and it shows that positron, which is the anti-particle of electron, is operational in the black hole. So there we can see that as time scales narrow, energy keeps on increasing. So now, by having that elastic feature of the classical level, and that discontinuous feature of the quantum level, we know that yes, there is this complex system. And so now that we know what complex system is, it's a system that transcends the it's a system that transcends the substrate dimension into higher dimension. and that is where we have the interlocking of dimensions. So now there is something in the nucleus of the black hole which, in the nucleus, or rather let me call it, yes, I'll call it nucleus, but in the black hole we have this neutron star suspension, and in the expanding phase of the universe we have inflationary suspension. So the two are being accounted for in the application of formula of everything. So now I want us to have idea of how formula of everything is applied by using the diagram that we have right here, and then the kind of flipping mechanism that we have, because we have two types of flipping mechanisms in the universe. We have dimensional flipping mechanism, then we have relativistic flipping mechanism. So relativistic flipping mechanism is feasible as we have energy density as the singularity of the Big Bang, and then we have real mass density as the singularity of the black hole. So you can see they are not the same. So then for the dimensional flipping mechanism, right inside the time energy wave model, we have equilateral triangle, and that is as a result of applying formula of everything. Because when you look at the formula of everything is dt dm equal to capital M plus 4m, dt dm equal to capital M plus 4m. Now the capital M plus 4m, that is the nested linear solution of that formula, and then the TdM, that will give us the curvature of time to energy. I say energy because mass convergence is emergent. So there are three things in the universe that are fundamental. So we have energy is fundamental, time is fundamental, space is fundamental. Now by applying formula of everything right inside the core of singularity, we realize that the decaying mechanism in the black hole on the base value of electron is not absolute. You understand? So definitely what we have there is that we have 1.1. You understand? So it is not even 1, but the decaying at the power of electrons value, that one is -1. So you can see that flipping of that integer, +1, though that is not 1 absolutely, because we have 1.1 and some other value. You understand? So by having that +1, -1 at the power level, so we know that we have quasar-like signal rather. So by having quasar-like signal, so then it means that we have swinging signal. So the swinging forth and back of energy, that is what we have in the core of the black hole's singularity. So now that is the solution, and it is simply because formula of everything is genuine. Because when you apply that formula, we can get to know the position of electron and get to know the position of corresponding classical counterparts value. And then when we reiterate the application, we can get to see the decaying effect on we see the decaying effect at quantum level and also at classical level. And there we see that the initial decay value that we have at the power is just the -1. You can see that that value is so tiny. but the corresponding classical decay worth is almost 2 billion. So that is synonymous to butterfly effect, where you just have a tiny effect at quantum level that could result to huge, effect at classical level. So now that, formula of everything is actually pointing to something so profound. So it's a genuine formula as far as I'm concerned. It's a formula, though I have the theory right there being published on peer-reviewed journal, which is ijser.org. So it's a theory that is falsifiable, testable, and verifiable. So mainstream scientists can actually go and explore the formula further and even apply the formula to know more about that formula. Now, in this live session, I will discuss more about complex system by using this diagram that I have right here. So now, I need more people to be aware of this live session on Twitch. So, if there are people that have joined already, I would appreciate it if you can just, chat, send message, let me see your message. You can actually, ask anything. I want it to be interactive. You can ask whatever it is that you don't understand. Though it's a novel discovery, but you can as well relate it to, physics and all that. But you can just because in my if you get to my YouTube channel, in the description section, I usually have links to my research publications, to my book and things like that, so you can get a copy of my research, work more on it, and get to see this, fact that I'm talking about. So now, I'm going to expand this for us to see. Okay, so can we really see this? I don't know. This is not too clear. This is not too clear, but I will briefly use, these ones that you can see to explain it. So I will do part 2 of this. I will get another clear image that I can use to fully explain it. Now, complex system of the universe. When you look at this equilateral triangle that we have drawn in red, that is the equilateral triangle of the past phase. And then there is another equilateral triangle drawn in black pen. That is, the equilateral triangle of the future. Now, at that present phase of time's peregrination, when we zoom in on that trajectory, we're going to have this interlocked equilateral triangle in that present phase of time's peregrination. So by having this, because the present is just a combination of the past and the future in vertical format. So that is why information can come right from the past into the present, and information can come from the future into the present. So every instance of our present moment is nourished by our past experience and the future imagination. So, what I'm trying to say is that your past experience will form your personality at every present instance. Then, your intuitive power to imagine, for you to solve problem and invent things, will determine, will nourish and define your present personality as well. Because when you solve problem, you can make your life better by that power of imagination. And anytime you imagine, you go into the future to get idea of things that have not been in existence. And once you have that problem solved, when you have the problem solved, you make your life better. And that betterment of your life is domiciled right in the present phase of your life. You understand? So right from the present, you go into the future, you get solution, then it becomes a useful virtue for you in your present moment. And same thing is applicable to your past experience. So now, what we call the present phase is the stacking of the equilateral triangle of the future and the past in vertical format. And that is why we could have this symbol that looks like the symbol of Star of David. Now, in fact, it's a Star of David as we have it right there. So now, the equilateral triangle will be suspended, and that is why in the formula of everything, you could see that we have mass worth being suspended. You understand? Because of its inverse relationship with time and energy. So at the edge, we have mass worth being suspended. That is at the classical level, but at the quantum level, it is suspended outside the time energy wave model. So now, by having this equilateral triangle, we can get to see that the nucleus is nothing but a compacted equilateral triangle. And so we can, when you look at that stacked equilateral triangles, they flipped. The equilateral triangles are being flipped and then they get stacked, or maybe being fused into one another or each other. By having it, you can see it is the end of each of the equilateral triangle is being suspended to the other, such that we have a tiny equilateral triangle at the top, at the bottom, and even two at the left side and two at the right side. So now, the compacted equilateral, where we have red convergence in circle, that is the compacted, which we can call nucleus of the Big Bang singularity. And so the compacted equilateral triangle, where we have the black convergence in form of circle, towards that extreme end, that is what we call the nucleus of the black hole. So now, by having equilateral triangle to be compacted as such, it means that we're going to have constantly accelerated momentum. So now the momentum of electron in the nucleus will be more energetic, because when you look at it, the region is where we have the curvature of energy, and so angular momentum will always change speed. And so the excess of that speed will be converted to mass worth, because we have compacted equilateral triangle, which we actually do something with the excess energy. You understand? So that is that. But basically, the chart that I have here, where I have the linear diagonal line right under the equilateral triangle shapes at the top, the one I have right here at the middle, that is just having the dimension of imaginary axis to real axis. And so complex number will now be a plus bi, which is going to be the complex number. So now when we look at the complex number, we know that there is this connection with the imaginary number. So imaginary number transcend the real realm, and that is why it is called imaginary number. But basically, you can see that there is this attachment of real number to imaginary number, and that is pointing to that interconnectivity of substrate dimension to higher dimension. But what you need to know about imaginary number is that imaginary number is a square root of -1. You understand? And that is a flipping system. So imaginary number is a kind of number that is at higher dimension that must be flipped to be retracted back to the substrate dimension. So that is what I have discovered by applying formula of everything. So now that complex system is a system that we define the full reality of the substrate dimension, and so the hierarchical transition goes on like that. So the full reality of 3D too will get connected to the 4D. It goes like that. So now for us to genuinely explain what complex system is, we need to know dimensional structure of the universe quite all right. So basically that is that. But then formula of everything is applied right here, down here, but we can't really see that. So in the subsequent video I will do justice to that. But basically, if I'm to give you brief explanation of what we have here, I put the value of electron in the place of m in formula of everything. So in formula of everything, formula of everything is dt dm equal to capital M plus 4m. So now when you put the value of electron in the place of the 2m, so if you run that formula of everything, we're going to get the classical counterpart, and it's going to be 2. I don't know, maybe you see the figure down like that, but I can see it briefly. I can see it. So the classical counterpart will be 2,277,250,000 kilograms. Now when you put that classical mass worth in the place of the 2m, then we're going to have that base value, the value of electron, being suspended at the 32nd zero. So because we're going to have that electron's value being separated by zeros, so that value, which is the value of the weak conveying force, is being suspended by zeros. So now we will have to manually annihilate the zeros, and when we do that in standard form, we're going to get 9.109 times 10 raised power minus 32 instead of 31. I told you that the trajectory of time is one-way traffic. So it is one-way traffic we can't traverse that trajectory of time 2 times. So by having the power to be minus 32, it means that there is this effect of decay on that particular value. So now, if we now run that 9.109 times 10 raised power minus 32, we will get another classical counterpart value. But this time it's not going to be 2,277,250,000 kilograms. It will be a million, so almost about 2 billion worth of classical mass what is being decayed. So that is that about applying the formula of everything. So by the time we are going to have, third result phase of this reiteration of formula of everything, we will then get that final solution where we have the swinging forth and back of electrons energy, which is synonymous to the quasar signal. We get to know that in the core singularity of black hole. So that is that about complex system of the universe. That is that about complex system of the universe. So this life is so essential because it will actually impact us with novel knowledge. So what I'm actually discussing here is the application of formula of everything. I'm actually treating complex system that that complex system is being discovered by application of formula of everything. Then formula of everything is developed to unify quantum mechanics to classical mechanics. We are able to have that gap being bridged by the annihilation of zeros, just as I just explained. So that is that. I believe this particular live session is quite informative. So I need more people to join the live session, and I will usually, from now onward, advertise the event before really having this live session. So thank you for your time. Thank you for getting to learn new things. I believe the whole thing is quite informative and insightful. So remain blessed.